Welcome to our deep dive
Oh, yeah.
into
Into
a really fascinating period of
Yeah.
Indian history.
Absolutely.
We're going to be talking about the decline of the Mughal Empire
Okay.
and the rise of all the regional powers that kind of popped up
Yeah.
between 1707 and 1757.
It's a pivotal era.
So imagine India
Oh, yeah.
at the beginning of the 18th century.
Yeah.
The Mughal Empire,
Uh-huh.
which was this untouchable symbol of power
Yeah.
and splendor,
Right.
is starting to show some cracks.
Interesting.
And it's a fascinating period.
Yeah.
And we're going to really uncover
Okay.
what caused this shift in power.
Okay.
So is it a sudden collapse or a
Yeah.
slow burn?
I think what makes this era so captivating is that it wasn't just a simple transfer of power.
Yeah.
It was really this intricate dance of internal weaknesses
Uh-huh.
and these external pressures
Yeah.
that just completely reshaped the political landscape.
To guide us through this intricate dance, we've got historical accounts,
Oh, wow.
we've got architectural analysis,
Fascinating.
and we even have glimpses into the lives of the people who lived through it,
Wow.
like emperors and nobles,
Incredible.
the whole cast of characters.
Yeah, these sources offer such a unique window
Yeah.
into a time of ambition,
Mhm.
political maneuvering, and just complete transformation.
Yeah.
The very foundations of power were shifting,
Right.
and all these new players
Yeah.
were eager to seize the moment.
Before we get into all that drama,
Yeah.
what did the Mughal Empire even look like at its peak?
To truly understand the fall,
Okay.
you have to appreciate the heights
Yeah.
that they reached.
Okay.
Think about rulers like Akbar,
Okay.
Shah Jahan.
Okay.
They oversaw an empire of immense wealth,
Yeah.
a formidable military, and just a culture renowned for its sophistication.
Right.
Their legacy is visible even today
Okay.
in these architectural marvels like the Taj Mahal
Yeah.
and Fatehpur Sikri,
Right.
these enduring testaments.
Those are more than just buildings.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Precisely.
They're statements of power.
Yeah.
And beyond those grand structures,
Mhm.
you have to consider that there was this complex
Okay.
and well-organized administration,
Okay.
this extensive network of roads,
Yeah.
and a flourishing trade connecting India to the rest of the world.
It sounds like a well-oiled machine.
It was for a time.
So where did things start to go wrong?
Yeah.
Empires don't just crumble overnight,
No, they don't.
do they?
No, the seeds of decline were sown over time.
Okay.
One significant factor was administrative fragmentation.
Oh, good.
Governing such a vast territory from a central point became increasingly difficult as the empire expanded.
Correct.
And what we start to see is powerful regional governors asserting their autonomy,
Right.
and they start flexing their muscles.
So almost like a giant octopus where the tentacles start to have a mind of their own.
Yeah, a very apt analogy. Then there were the economic challenges,
Okay.
constant warfare, the luxurious lifestyles of the Mughal court,
Yeah.
and a decline in trade revenue
Right.
put just this enormous strain
Yeah.
on the treasury.
Right.
The empire was just hemorrhaging money.
I imagine weak leadership didn't help matters.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
The emperors who followed Aurangzeb,
True.
who died in 1707,
Yeah.
weren't quite up to the task,
Right.
to put it mildly.
Right.
Succession struggles
Okay.
became increasingly common.
Yeah.
And the empire lacked the strong leadership. It
Okay.
needed to hold things together. And it's
Yeah.
in this context of
Yeah.
internal turmoil
Right.
that we see the rise of these regional powers,
Okay.
just eager to fill the void.
Let's talk about those ambitious newcomers.
Yeah.
So who are the major players that kind of seized this opportunity?
Well, one of the most prominent groups
Okay.
were the Marathas.
Okay.
Hailing from Western India, they were renowned for their guerrilla warfare tactics,
Yeah.
which proved incredibly effective against the Mughal armies.
Right.
Under leaders like Shivaji,
Mm-hmm.
they established their own independent kingdom
Wow.
and directly challenged Mughal dominance.
What about the Sikhs?
Yeah, the Sikhs played a significant role as
That's it,
well.
right.
Indeed.
Yeah.
While initially starting as a religious community,
Okay.
the Sikhs transformed
Uh.
into this really potent military force
Yeah.
in the Punjab region.
So religion played a pretty significant role in their rise to power.
In part, yes.
Okay.
Leaders like Banda Bahadur
Yeah.
really rallied the Sikh community,
Uh-huh.
and led them in resistance against the Mughals.
Okay.
Their military skill
Right.
and growing political ambitions
No.
made them a force to be reckoned with.
Okay, so we've got the internal Mughal turmoil.
Yeah.
Powerful groups like the Marathas and the Sikhs
Right.
are making their move.
Uh-huh.
What a recipe for upheaval.
Oh, yeah. It was a time of great change.
But there's another piece to this puzzle.
Okay.
What about the Europeans?
The Europeans,
Didn't they factor into all of this?
they absolutely did.
Yeah.
This is where things get particularly interesting.
Okay.
Initially, European trading companies like the British East India Company and the French East India Company
Right.
were primarily interested in commerce.
Right.
They were after spices.
Classic European motive.
Right. They wanted those valuable Indian goods,
Yeah.
but they quickly recognized the opportunity
Okay.
presented by the Mughal decline.
Uh-huh.
As the empire fragmented, regional powers sought allies,
Yeah.
and the Europeans were more than happy to provide military support in
Oh.
exchange for trade concessions
Yeah.
and political influence.
So it's a classic divide and conquer strategy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The French, under the very ambitious Joseph-François Dupleix,
Yeah.
were particularly active in this game.
Okay.
He really envisioned French dominance in South India and skillfully played the regional powers against one another.
Okay.
And naturally, this led to conflict with the British.
I'm guessing these weren't just polite disagreements over tea and crumpets?
Hardly the Carnatic Wars.
All right.
A series of conflicts between the British and the French
Okay.
were a direct result of their competing ambitions
Right.
on Indian soil.
Right.
These wars had a profound impact
Yeah.
on the balance of power
Okay.
in the region.
So we're seeing shifting alliances,
Yeah.
European powers maneuvering for position,
Uh-huh.
and all of this is playing out
Yeah.
against the backdrop of Mughal decline.
Right.
It's like a high-stakes game of chess with the future of India at stake.
It's a fascinating period. And,
Right.
if we examine the architecture of this era,
Okay.
it offers this really tangible reflection
Okay.
of these shifting power dynamics.
Let's delve into this architectural angle.
Okay.
What can buildings tell us about these power struggles?
Well, in the early Mughal Empire, there's a strong Timurid influence.
Can you remind us what exactly defines Timurid architecture?
The Timurids were a dynasty who
Uh-huh.
ruled over Persia
Okay.
and Central Asia in the 14th and 15th centuries.
Uh-huh.
They were known for their intricate and grandiose buildings,
Okay.
characterized by geometric patterns,
Okay.
vibrant colors, and just this sense of awe-inspiring scale.
Okay.
The Mughals, with their Central Asian roots,
Right.
incorporated many of these elements
Yeah.
into their own architectural style.
So it's like a visual reminder of their heritage?
Yes, and a declaration of their imperial ambitions.
Yeah.
Take, for example, the nine-bay tomb plan,
Okay.
a very common feature in Mughal tombs.
Okay.
This design,
Ah.
with a central chamber surrounded by 8 smaller rooms,
Okay.
originates from Timurid architecture.
Okay.
It symbolizes order, harmony,
Uh-huh.
and the emperor's central position in the
Okay.
universe.
Wow.
But as regional powers grew stronger,
Okay.
we start to see this divergence in architectural styles.
Almost like architecture became a language of resistance.
Precisely.
Yeah.
We see these distinct regional styles emerging, reflecting a growing sense of independence.
Right.
For example, the Rajput palaces of Rajasthan
Okay.
are a stark contrast
Okay.
to the Mughal aesthetic.
Right.
They possess their own unique character,
Ah.
incorporating local traditions
Right.
and materials.
It's like they're saying we're not just miniature Mughals.
Right. Yeah.
We have our own
They have
identity.
their own thing going on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And even mosques,
Mhm.
which were primarily religious structures,
Yeah.
also served as symbols of power and authority.
It's fascinating how architectural details,
Mhm.
from the layout of a tomb
Right.
to the decoration of a mosque,
Yeah.
can tell us so much about the political landscape.
It's like they're leaving clues for us to decode centuries later.
Exactly.
And speaking of clues,
Yeah.
the decline of the Mughals and the rise of these regional powers
Yeah.
sent ripples across India. Yeah. And what we're witnessing is the beginning of a profound transformation
Right.
that would shape the destiny of the subcontinent
Yeah.
for centuries to come.
That's a great point.
It's a pivotal moment in Indian history.
Yeah.
It's the start of something new.
Yeah.
And the consequences are going to be felt for generations.
And that's what makes it so fascinating to explore.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a story of change,
Yeah.
of ambition,
Yeah.
and of the enduring power of ideas.
And that's what makes it so exciting to dive into.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a story that continues to resonate even today.
Okay.
So let's dive in
Let's do it.
and see where this journey takes us.
Let's go.
It's tempting to see this period as just one empire falling and others rising,
Right.
but it's much more nuanced than that.
Okay.
The decline of the Mughals,
Yeah.
it wasn't happening in isolation.
Uh-huh.
It was really intertwined with all these changes
Okay.
in religious beliefs,
Okay.
social structures.
Okay. Even how people express their identities
Okay,
through things like art and architecture.
I love uncovering those nuances.
Oh, yeah?
How did these changes actually play out?
Well, consider the rise of these new religious movements.
Okay.
As the Mughals' grip on power loosened,
Uh-huh.
we see groups like the Sikhs challenging the established social and political order.
We talked about their military strength.
Yeah,
But what were their core beliefs?
right.
What made them different?
Well, Sikhism grew out of the teachings of Guru Nanak,
Okay.
who preached a message of equality,
Okay.
devotion to one God,
Okay.
and rejection of rituals and caste distinctions.
Okay.
This was a radical departure
Right.
from the prevailing norms of the time.
So as a movement that appealed to people who felt
Yeah.
marginalized or excluded by the system.
Precisely.
Yeah.
As the Mughal Empire weakened,
Uh-huh.
Sikhism gained momentum,
Okay.
offering a sense of belonging
Right.
and identity for those seeking an alternative path.
It's interesting how periods of instability and uncertainty often
Yeah.
give birth to new
Yeah.
spiritual and philosophical ideas.
It's true.
Yeah, people are searching for answers,
Yeah.
meaning,
Oh,
for
no.
something to hold on to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just about religion.
Oh, yeah.
We also see the rise of these regional identities
Uh-huh.
during this time.
Okay.
As the Mughal Empire fragmented,
Right.
people began to identify more strongly with their
Right.
local culture,
Okay.
language, and traditions.
So there's a shift from a unified Mughal identity
Yes.
to a more diverse and localized sense of belonging.
Yeah. And this shift is reflected in everything from the
Absolutely.
literature and music of the period to the architectural styles we discussed earlier.
Exactly.
It's like a cultural blossoming, a celebration of regional distinctiveness.
Indeed.
Yeah.
And this process was further energized by the emergence of these powerful regional courts,
Okay.
which became centers of patronage.
For artists,
Uh-huh.
writers,
Yeah.
and musicians.
So it's not just about political power.
No, it's not.
It's also about cultural influence.
It's about cultural influence.
These regional courts are vying for prestige and legitimacy,
They are.
not just territory.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this competition
Uh-huh.
creates this really dynamic cultural landscape
Okay.
where diverse artistic traditions just thrive.
I'm starting to see the bigger picture here.
Yeah.
The decline of the Mughals
Uh-huh.
isn't just a simple story of emperors losing their grip on power.
It's a much more complex story.
It's this complex tapestry of political, social, religious, and cultural transformation.
You've captured it perfectly.
Yeah.
It's a period of both fragmentation and innovation,
Right.
loss and renewal.
Yeah, and this period of transition had a profound, lasting impact on the subcontinent.
Oh, absolutely.
The seeds of modern India
Yes.
were sown during this era of decentralization,
Absolutely.
the rise of the regional powers, the growth of new religious movements, the flourishing of diverse cultural identities.
Yeah.
All of these factors contributed to shaping the India we know today.
It's amazing how events from centuries ago
Yeah.
continue to shape the present.
It is mind-blowing.
It really is.
But before we get too far ahead,
Okay.
let's not forget to explore the long-term consequences of this period.
Right.
What happened to these regional powers?
Okay.
How did their relationships with each other
Yeah.
and with those meddling Europeans?
The Europeans always meddling.
Meadow.
Those are excellent questions.
Yeah.
And they lead us into this next chapter
Right.
of this fascinating story.
Okay.
The decline of the Mughals, it was just the beginning.
Okay.
What followed was
Yeah.
an era of fierce competition,
Okay.
constantly shifting alliances
Right.
as regional powers fought for dominance
Right,
in this
right.
rapidly changing landscape.
Okay, so we've got these ambitious regional players
Yeah.
maneuvering for power and the Europeans lurking in the background.
Always lurking.
eager to exploit the situation.
Oh, absolutely.
It sounds like the stage is set for some serious power struggles.
It was a time of great upheaval.
So what were some of the key turning points that shaped this period?
Well, one crucial turning point
Okay.
was the rise of the Maratha Empire.
Okay.
They weren't content with just controlling a small region under the leadership of the Peshwas,
Okay.
who acted as prime ministers
Okay.
and military commanders.
Okay.
They expanded their territories significantly.
Peshwas.
Yeah.
That's a new term.
Yeah. They were essentially the power behind the throne.
Okay.
During this period of Maratha expansion,
Uh,
think of them as these brilliant strategists
Yeah.
and administrators
okay.
who really consolidated Maratha power.
Okay.
But their growing influence
Yeah.
brought them into conflict
Okay.
with another ambitious force,
Okay.
the Afghans.
Right. The Afghans?
The Afghans?
Weren't they known for being pretty fierce warriors?
That's putting it mildly.
Okay.
The Afghans, under leaders like Ahmad Shah Durrani,
Yeah.
launched a series of invasions into India.
Okay.
They weren't just raiding for plunder.
Right.
They were aiming to establish their own dominance.
Right.
They clashed with the Mughals,
Uh-huh.
the Marathas,
Yeah.
and pretty much anyone who stood in their way.
Yeah.
It was a tumultuous time with battles raging across the subcontinent.
It sounds like a chaotic free-for-all with everyone vying for supremacy.
It was a time of great uncertainty.
Yeah. Where did the Europeans fit into all of this?
Yeah.
Were they just watching from the sidelines?
The Europeans, particularly the British,
Okay.
were watching these developments very closely.
Okay.
They saw an opportunity to further their own interests
Right.
amidst all the chaos.
Okay.
They were playing a long game,
Uh-huh.
using a combination of diplomacy,
Okay.
military strategy,
Uh-huh.
and frankly, a good dose of cunning.
I'm starting to see a pattern here.
Yeah.
It's not just about brute strength.
It's not just about brute strength.
It's also about strategy
Right.
and taking advantage of opportunity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The British were masters of realpolitik,
Okay.
which is a political philosophy that prioritizes practical considerations
Okay.
over moral or ideological concerns.
Okay.
In other words,
Yeah.
they were willing to do whatever it took to
Right.
advance their interests,
Okay.
even if it meant making alliances with one power one day
Right.
and then turning against them the next.
So they were playing all sides against each other.
Essentially, they understood that a fragmented India
Right.
was a weak India.
Right.
An India ripe for exploitation.
Right.
They forged alliances with some Indian rulers while crushing others.
Yeah.
They weren't afraid to use their military might when necessary, but they also employed shrewd diplomacy
Whoa.
and economic maneuvering to achieve their goals.
One of their key strategies
Yeah,
was to gain control of vital economic resources.
absolutely.
What kind of resources?
Well, one prime example
Okay.
was the textile trade in Bengal.
Okay.
Bengal was renowned for its high-quality textiles,
Uh,
which were in high demand globally.
okay.
The British saw the immense wealth
Yeah.
generated by this trade,
Right.
and they were determined to control it.
Yeah.
They gradually infiltrated the Bengali economy,
Uh-huh.
established their own trading posts,
Okay.
and ultimately used their military and political power
Okay.
to gain dominance over the region.
So they were playing the long game,
They were.
systematically securing their economic interests,
Yes.
while the regional powers were busy battling each other.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It was a shrewd strategy,
Uh-huh.
and it paid off handsomely.
Yeah.
While the Marathas, Afghans, and other regional powers were
Mhm.
focused on short-term gains,
Mm.
the British were thinking decades ahead, laying the foundation for what would eventually become the British Raj.
It's a sobering reminder
It is.
of how cunning and strategic thinking
Yeah.
can trump brute force in the long run.
Absolutely.
What about the Mughals?
Mughals?
Were they completely out of the picture at this point?
Not entirely.
Okay.
They still held a symbolic importance as
Uh-huh.
the emperors of India,
Uh-huh.
even though their actual power had dwindled significantly.
Oh.
But they were increasingly becoming pawns
Yeah.
in the games played by the regional powers
Right.
and the Europeans.
So they were like a fading star.
Yes,
Yeah. Still visible, but no longer emitting the same light or heat.
a very apt metaphor.
Yeah.
The Mughal emperor was still a figurehead,
Right.
but he was largely at the mercy
Yeah.
of whoever held the real power on the ground.
It's fascinating and a little bit sad to see how an empire that once seemed invincible could be reduced to such a state.
It's a reminder that even the most powerful empires are not immune to decline.
What ultimately sealed the Mughals' fate?
Right.
Was there a particular event or a series of events
Yeah.
that marked their final decline?
Well, there wasn't one single decisive blow.
Okay.
It was more of a slow and agonizing demise,
Mm-hmm.
a combination of internal weaknesses,
Okay.
external pressures,
Right.
and their own inability to adapt to the changing political landscape,
Okay.
ultimately led to their downfall.
So it was death by 1,000 cuts.
You could say that.
Yeah.
But even in their weakened state, they continued to play a role
Okay.
in the intricate power dynamics of the time.
Right.
Their names still carried weight, and their symbolic authority could be used as a bargaining chip by those who sought legitimacy or influence.
It sounds like the Mughal Empire was like a once mighty tree,
Yeah.
slowly succumbing to disease and decay,
Yeah.
while new saplings were springing up all around,
Right.
vying for sunlight and nutrients.
That's a vivid image and a fitting analogy for the state of India at the time.
Right.
The decline of the Mughals created a vacuum,
Right.
a period of uncertainty and opportunity that allowed new powers to emerge and reshape the subcontinent.
This has been a fascinating look into a truly pivotal period in Indian history.
It has.
We've seen the Mughal Empire decline from within, and powerful regional players like the Marathas and Sikhs rise to prominence.
Right.
But we've also seen how external forces like the Europeans,
Yes.
particularly the British, were exploiting the situation to their own advantage.
They were very adept at that.
It feels like we're on the brink of a major transformation.
We are,
The
Woody.
very future of India hanging in the balance.
The stakes couldn't be higher. Yeah, so we left off talking about this scene of incredible complexity.
Right, yeah, with these regional powers all jostling for position.
Yeah.
And you've got the Europeans kind of maneuvering in the background.
Always maneuvering.
Always, right?
Yeah.
And it really sounds like the Mughal Empire is on its last legs.
It's a fading power at this point.
Yeah, so what ultimately sealed their fate?
Yeah.
Was there this one defining moment where it all came crashing down?
Well, it wasn't so much a single event.
Okay.
It's like a gradual erosion of their power. You know, they faced a combination of internal strife, these external pressures,
Right.
and just this inability to adapt
Yeah.
to the shifting political landscape. It's
Yeah.
like this once mighty tree slowly succumbing to disease,
Okay. Yeah.
while these new saplings are sprouting up all around, you know, eager for sunlight and resources.
So a slow decline, but with significant repercussions.
Oh, absolutely.
What happened to those ambitious regional players
Yeah.
as the Mughals faded?
Okay.
Did any of them manage to establish lasting dominance?
Their stories are really this blend of ambition, resilience, and ultimately adaptation.
Okay.
Take the Marathas, for instance.
Okay.
They continued their expansion under the leadership of the Peshwas. These figures who acted as a sort of prime minister
Okay.
and military commander,
Right.
effectively wielding power behind the scenes.
So the Peshwas were able to kind of maintain the momentum
They were,
of that Maratha expansion.
yes, they were really skilled administrators and just brilliant military strategists.
Okay.
For a time, they even established their own empire,
Wow.
but their success
Yeah.
led them to clash with another rising power,
Okay.
the Afghans.
Right. We talked about the Afghans and their fierce warrior culture.
Oh, yeah.
How did they factor into this struggle for power?
Well, the Afghans, under leaders like Ahmad Shah Durrani,
Right.
weren't content with just raiding and plundering.
Okay.
You know, they wanted to carve out their own empire in India.
Okay.
So they launched this series of invasions,
Right.
challenging the Mughals,
Okay.
the Marathas, and anyone else who stood in their path.
Yeah.
It was a very tumultuous time.
Yeah, it sounds like a chaotic period with battles raging across the subcontinent. Where did the Europeans fit into all of this?
Right.
Were they just watching from the sidelines?
The Europeans, and particularly the British,
Okay.
were far from passive observers.
Okay.
They were shrewdly analyzing the situation, recognizing this opportunity to advance their own interests.
Yeah.
Amidst all the chaos,
Right.
they were playing the long game,
Yeah.
using a combination of diplomacy, military force,
Okay.
and frankly, a good dose of cunning.
Yeah, so it seems like Strategy and opportunism were just as important as brute force in this era.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The British were masters of real politics,
Right.
a political approach that prioritized pragmatism and power
Okay.
over ethical concerns.
Okay.
In other words, they were willing to do whatever it took to further their own goals,
Right.
even if it meant shifting alliances or exploiting rivalries.
So essentially playing all sides against each other.
Essentially, yes.
Wow.
They understood that a fragmented India
Yeah.
was a vulnerable India.
Right.
So they forged alliances with some Indian rulers
Right.
while crushing others.
Yeah.
They weren't afraid to use military force when necessary, but they also employed clever diplomacy and economic manipulation to achieve their aims.
One of their key tactics was to gain control of these vital economic resources,
Absolutely.
like the lucrative textile trade in Bengal.
Yes.
Bengal's textiles were renowned worldwide, right?
Oh, yeah, they were highly sought after.
So how did the British manage to gain control of this trade?
Well, they strategically infiltrated the Bengali economy, establishing trading posts and gradually expanding their influence. And over time, they used their growing military and political power to dominate the region, securing control of this valuable resource.
So while the regional powers were all fighting amongst themselves, the British are kind of quietly laying the foundation for their future empire.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Their long-term vision and their strategic maneuvering gave them a significant advantage.
Yeah. While the Marathas, Afghans, and other regional powers were focused on these immediate gains, the British were playing the long game, setting the stage for what would eventually become the British Raj.
Exactly.
It's a striking example of how strategic thinking and a willingness to exploit opportunities can ultimately triumph over brute force.
It really is.
What happened to the Mughal emperors during all of this?
Yeah.
Were they completely sidelined?
They still held symbolic importance as the emperors of India, even though their actual power had diminished significantly.
Right.
But they were increasingly pawns in the games played by the regional powers and the Europeans.
Yeah.
You know, their authority was more symbolic than real.
It's almost tragic to see this empire that was once so powerful reduced to a symbolic figurehead.
It does highlight the cyclical nature of power.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We have.
You know, we've seen the Mughal Empire crumble under the weight of internal weaknesses and external pressures. We've witnessed the rise of these ambitious regional powers like the Marathas and the Sikhs, each vying for dominance.
Yeah.
And we've seen how the Europeans, especially the British, exploited these divisions to their own advantage.
They were masters of that.
Ultimately setting the stage for their own imperial ambitions in India.
They saw the opportunity and they seized it.
Yeah, it's been a fascinating and complex journey through a pivotal period in Indian history.
Absolutely. It really is a period filled with intrigue and transformation.
Yeah, the decline of the Mughals and the rise of these new powers really set the stage for the modern Indian subcontinent.
It did.
The echoes of this era can still be felt today.
They can.
So much to think about. If our listeners want to delve deeper into this era, what would you recommend they explore?
Well, I'd encourage them to dive into the specific stories of those regional powers.
Okay.
How did their cultures and political systems evolve? What were their ambitions?
Yeah.
You know, it's also fascinating to look at the cultural transformations of this period.
Yeah.
How did art, architecture, and literature reflect these shifting power dynamics?
Excellent recommendations. It's a reminder that history is more than just dates and battles.
It is.
It's about exploring the lives, the ambitions, and the struggles of the people who lived through these transformative times.
And their stories are captivating.
And in the case of 18th century India, it's about understanding how these power shifts shape the destiny of an entire subcontinent.
Absolutely. It's a story that continues to resonate even today.
And that's a great point. It makes you wonder how different things might have been if the Mughals had held on to power.
Right.
Or if the Marathas had managed to unite the subcontinent.
History is filled with what-ifs.
It is, and that's what makes it so captivating. It's a reminder of the complexities of human ambition, the unpredictable nature of power, and just the enduring impact of the past on the present.
Well said to our listeners. Keep exploring, keep asking those questions, and keep uncovering those hidden layers of history.
Exactly. And until next time, keep those minds curious.